Welcome to our presentation about the HUD Good Neighbor Next Door program. Here you'll learn about who can qualify and more. So what exactly is the Good Neighbor Next Door sales program? Well, HUD Good Neighbor Next Door program was designed to help strengthen America's communities in designated revitalization areas across the United States. The program offers a discount to eligible participants who qualify under 3 different categories during a lottery round bidding period. To be eligible, the buyer must either be a police officer, a teacher, a firefighter, or an EMT. The buyer must offer the exact HUD list price when bidding on any Good Neighbor Next Door property. They will then receive a 50% discount off of that list price. The buyer must also occupy the home as their primary residence for a specified occupancy period. If the buyer qualifies for any FHA-insured mortgage programs, the down payment could be as low as $100, and they could even finance closing costs. Buyers must also use a licensed realtor. Only single-unit homes, townhomes, and condos are eligible in the Good Neighbor Next Door program. We'll go over each of the 3 qualifying groups in detail next. For a buyer to be eligible under the law enforcement eligibility category, they must be employed full-time by a law enforcement agency at either the federal, the state, the general local government, or an Indian tribal government. The buyer must be sworn to uphold the law, make arrests for violations that include violations of federal, state, tribal, county, township, or municipal law level. Law enforcement officers are restricted to homes that are within a reasonable commute to their job location, but the Good Neighbor Next Door home must be their primary residence. For teacher eligibility, the buyer must be employed as a full-time teacher by a state-accredited public or private school that provides services to students in the pre-K to 12th grade year. University or college employees are no longer able to participate in the Good Neighbor Next Door program. The prospective home must be in the area or the district where the teacher instructs. To be eligible under the firefighter EMT eligibility, the buyer must be employed full-time by a fire department or emergency medical service responder unit of the federal government, state or unit of local government, or an Indian tribal government. The prospective home must be in the area where the firefighter or EMT services. Let's talk a little bit about the Good Neighbor Next Door lottery. Homes are open to eligible participants in those 3 categories in a lottery drawing during the first 7 days. And then it opens to the general public at full list price if there's no eligible bidder. Lottery drawings take place on the 8th day after the house is listed. Lottery entries must be received before midnight Central Time on the 7th day. Winners are notified the following day, with the exception being weekends and holidays. If the initial winner does not close on the property, then the property is offered to the backup bidder. Backup bidders could be notified weeks or months after the lottery drawing has taken place. If the buyer chooses to not purchase a home after the contract has been accepted, they will lose their earnest money. However, if they are unable to qualify for a loan due to a job loss, an illness, or a death of immediate family member, or another good cause, HUD will refund the earnest money back to the bidder. The following are different types of financing allowed for the HUD Good Neighbor Next Door program. FHA, VA, conventional mortgage, and cash are accepted. HUD requires that the buyer signs a second mortgage and note on the discounted amount. No payments or interest are required on this silent second mortgage if the buyer lives in the home for the entire 36-month occupancy period. The buyer could be required to pay a pro rata portion of the discount back to HUD if they fail to stay the entire 36 months of the occupancy period. FHA 203K mortgages are also allowed. The 203K mortgage helps buyers purchase a home and have enough money to rehab or repair it. Repairs must cost $5,000 or more, and the repair cost and the mortgage are combined into one single monthly payment for the buyer. Any repairs that are under $5,000 should be considered as a 203B loan. Buyers can also use other home buying programs in conjunction with the Good Neighbor Next Door program, as long as the buyer meets the Good Neighbor Next Door's rules while participating in the other programs. Have your buyer check with their lender for further information about these financing options. The following are financing codes. IN stands for insurable and that the property meets the FHA 203B financing requirements and that there are no obvious repairs necessary to insure an FHA loan to buyer. IE stands for insurable with escrow and means that the property is eligible for an FHA 203B loan and necessary repairs total less than $5,000. UI indicates that the property is uninsurable, meaning that the property requires more extensive repairs after the closing of escrow and therefore is not eligible for FHA mortgage insurance in the property's as-is condition. So let's take a moment to discuss in detail the occupancy period. The purpose of the program is to strengthen communities by encouraging employed professional law enforcement officers, teachers, and firefighters or EMTs to live in the community that they serve. The buyer must live in the home for the entire 36-month occupancy period that has been set up as part of the restrictions for HUD's Good Neighbor Next Door program. The buyer will have 30, 90, or 180 days to move into the home, depending on the condition of the home and the amount of repairs needed to make the home habitable, if any, after closing. The 30th, 90th, or 180th day is considered the start day for the occupancy period. The buyer will have fulfilled the occupancy period 36 months after the start date. After the 36-month occupancy period is over, the buyer may sell the home and retain any profits. If the buyer leaves the employment category that made them eligible for the Good Neighbor Next Door home, nothing will change, but they must continue to reside in the home for the duration of the occupancy period. Please make sure to advise your prospective buyer to not attempt to participate in the Good Neighbor Next Door program if they know in advance that they will not be employed in an eligible field for at least 1 full year into the program. If the buyer fails to fulfill the 36-month occupancy period, they will have to repay HUD on a prorated schedule, and they will be in direct violation of the Good Neighbor Next Door program. HUD will conduct spot checks to make sure the buyer is still occupying the residence. If the buyer does not comply with the program, HUD will pursue the buyer to the full extent of the law, which could cause HUD to foreclose on the mortgage. If a participant fails to honor the 36-month occupancy requirement, HUD can demand repayment of the discounted amount on a prorated basis. That means that the buyer would have to repay HUD based on a percentage of the 36 months, which is 3 years, they owned and lived in the home. So say the buyer receives a 50% discount off of a $120,000 home, which would be $60,000, and they sold the home after 18 months, HUD would take $30,000 or half that discounted amount from the proceeds of the sale for the buyer failing to stay the entire length of the occupancy period. Now, at the end of the occupancy period, there are no restrictions or penalties on the sale of the property. Occupancy term is extended 6 months for homes purchased under the FHA 203K rehab loan. Active military duty participants who are deployed are not required to occupy the property and may rent out while deployed if necessary to protect their home from vandalism. Written permission from HUD must be obtained prior to renting out a Good Neighbor Next Door home. Good Neighbor Next Door HUD homes require an earnest money deposit equal to 1% of the list price, but no less than $500 and no more than $2,000. If an offer is accepted, the earnest money deposit will be credited back to the buyer at closing. If an offer is rejected, the earnest money deposit will be returned to the buyer. HUD considers all offers as a commitment to purchase if your buyer is awarded the sale. Please remind your buyer to carefully consider their offer and make them aware of HUD's policy on earnest money. A buyer may choose to take advantage of HUD's $100 move-in option. Please note, all normal closing costs, repairs, improvements, broker commissions, and fees are added to the buyer's mortgage. Thank you for attending our presentation on HUD's Good Neighbor Next Door program.